Hey friends, I want to talk about the work of Tony Smith, which is currently on view at the Pace Gallery through July 26th. Tony Smith is an outdoor minimalist, which is a rare exception within a rare exception. Minimalism itself is an exception from every other art movement that exists. Every other art movement has a frame or a pedestal. It is to mark where the art stops. So art, not art. Art, not art. But the minimalists in the 1960s and 70s had this crazy idea. What if we blurred the frame? What if we made a work that made you notice the wall and the space that you are in as much as the work? Minimalism is an effort to balance an object and the room that it is in 50-50. So a successful minimalist work of art, like Carl Andre, is as much about the sculpture on the floor as it is about the ceiling. A Dan Flavin, who does the sculptures out of fluorescent light tubes, is as much about the light tube as it is about what it's doing to the wall next to the work. In fact, I wrote an article for Design Milk 2 years ago. I'm putting the link in the description, but I only photographed the adjacent walls of a Dan Flavin. So I went to a Dan Flavin show at David Zwirner Gallery, and I only photographed the walls that did not have a Dan Flavin to prove this point that the effort of minimalism is a balance with the space it is in. So that's the reason that your brain should explode when I say outdoor minimalist, because Tony Smith is not trying to balance his sculpture with the ceiling. He's trying to balance his sculpture with the frickin' sky, with a 40-story building in Manhattan. And so they are huge and they are black and they have aggressive angles only to balance, to fit in this massive environment. So if you take a Tony Smith sculpture and you move it into a space that has a ceiling with pure white walls, you have exaggerated every single feature that was meant only to balance itself with the sky. It's something I call super minimalism. So this is Tony Smith at the Pace Gallery right now. I've seen this sculpture a billion times at Hunter College, but now it feels huge, like enormous, because the gallery has purposefully thrown off the balance of minimalism in a really interesting way. Most museums throw off the balance of minimalism in the wrong direction, like they'll put a work of art next to a Dan Flavin, which prevents you from really appreciating the adjacent wall of light. But in this case, they've done it on purpose to create this complete new view of Tony Smith. It falls under the category of curatorial override. If you're fascinated with that concept and other examples of it, I've put a video above from at least a year ago where I talk about another example of curatorial override. But here's the way that that show has affected my view of the entire art world. There's a Rembrandt at the Metropolitan Museum of Art painted in 1660. I know this seems like it has nothing to do with minimalism. The light in this painting is from a lamp or a candle. That's what's hitting his forehead. And the people who viewed this painting when it was first made also viewed the work under a lamp or a candle. So when you view this painting right now at the Metropolitan Museum of Art under an electric light bulb, it's the same thing as that Tony Smith show. Everything pops and is louder than it was ever intended to be. So I printed out a map of the Metropolitan Museum of Art to find out which rooms had examples of paintings like that. And I picked the second floor because the first floor is Egyptian and Roman, so that's not fair. The second floor is all paintings, European and American. Everything in orange is under the wrong light. What? So I'm going to start using super minimalism as a verb to talk about any curatorial override where you've exaggerated the features of a work of art because of its location change. Tony Smith is on view at the Pace Gallery through July 26th, but at some point they're going to jump into summer hours and be closed on weekends, so always check gallery hours before you go. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in a week. Okay, so occasionally there's something about an exhibition that just bugs the heck out of me. Like it's this loop in my brain and I can't get it to stop. In this case, it is what is the shape of that Tony Smith sculpture? Like from the front it looks like this, from the back it looks like this, and I couldn't for the life of me get what that shape is kind of in my brain. And so I walked around the sculpture like 16 times in the gallery, and the security guards started getting nervous because I think they thought I was trying to escape their view to vandalize or do something crazy. And so I just had to go home and recreate one in miniature as a way to understand what that shape is. And so I'm going to now, if you're curious, walk you through the process of how I made this thing. Enjoy. Okay, so I'm going to speed this up in a second, but just so you understand what you're looking at, on the top left of the screen is what I'm looking at on my computer monitor. I took a bunch of photos of the work from every angle, and so I can flip through to kind of check my work. And then I'm going to use this file folder to cut it up and try to make the form just really quick, really sloppy to understand what's going on. And so I'm not measuring anything at all. It's just very sloppy, very fast, just trying to estimate the shapes, estimate how much the sculpture is leaning. I'm making a lot of mistakes, and so occasionally I make a mistake and have to cut a little patch and tape it on. It's almost like working with clay, except I'm working with paper here. And so I end up with this form, which is sloppy and incorrect because I didn't measure anything. But it allows me to really think about the logic and the geometry of this piece and kind of theorize about what's going on. And so my first guess is that maybe this entire thing is made up of triangles. And so then I set out to test that theory. I made a grid of equilateral triangles and gave myself the rule that I can only use that shape to find out if I did that, would I end up with a more accurate form? So that's what I'm doing here. By the way, if you dig this kind of behind the scenes thing, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and you watch next week's episode because it's another Q&A episode where I answer user submitted questions. And the answer to one of those questions is me building another model of another thing in a different way. So subscribe and you will love next week. And sure enough, when it's done, I can check the photographs and the angle that it leans is 100% accurate and correct. So I know that this theory of using equilateral triangles is solid. Okay, so now that that theory works out, I'm going to take it into a 3D modeling software so the triangles can be perfect. And my idea of how to do that, because my skills on 3D modeling are not great at this point, is I could flatten this whole thing out. So you're going to see me cut this to pieces to flatten everything out. And if I draw it flat on a 3D modeling software, which you'll see later, then I can fold it into place. It's just kind of the easiest way, I thought, with my limited skills, that I could get this shape to work. So this is Google SketchUp, and what you're going to see me do is draw the flattened form and then fold it up. But I needed it to snap to something when I fold it up, because I don't want to calculate mathematically that angle. I just want it to snap when I fold it up. So I drew a little pyramid here. That's just so when it's all done, I can fold it up and it knows to snap to that angle. And I found out, by the way, that I would not have to draw 100% of it flat. If you think of this as a cube, if you were going to do this with a cube and fold it up, you would not have to draw the top of the cube, because folding up the four walls would create the top of the cube. So I figured out the minimal amount of walls I would have to draw so that when they're folded up, the top almost completes itself. And now the flat form is done, so I'm going to snap it up to that pyramid. By the way, Tony Smith's art career is super short. The majority of his life, he was an architect. He was a student of Frank Lloyd Wright, and this is one of Tony Smith's houses. And then pretty late in Tony Smith's life, like when he's in his 50s, is when minimalism happens, and Tony Smith jumps ship from an architect and becomes a sculptor for the remainder of his life. And then all I should need to do is connect the dots at the top to kind of finish the form. So at this point, I'm super happy. You'll see me drawing a little cylinder, because at this point I decide that I want to 3D print this thing, but I should also print an appropriately scaled version of myself. And so that cylinder is to represent how tall I would be. I just measured the pixels, and then proportionally, that's how tall I would be. And the reason it's floating in the air is because I realized that I should print it upside down. If I print this upside down, I don't have to print any supports for it, so that now when I flip it upside down, that cylinder will be touching the print bed of my printer. And then here I took that file and I put it into Cura, which is software that translates it into a language that the 3D printer understands. And then I downloaded a human form from the internet. You can download all sorts of things for free. And I picked the one that looked the most like me. And then all I'm doing is shrinking it visually to be the same height as the cylinder. So it's like the sloppiest way I could figure out those proportions with a limited amount of math. And then all I gotta do is print it out. When I'm done, I'm gonna throw some black spray paint on it, and then I had to figure out how to make a little base for the mini-me. So you'll see me do that with paper and glue, and then we're done. And that's it. The entire thing in miniature with the correct lean and mini-me. If you've watched this far, you're legit my favorite. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in a week. Thank you for watching.